Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Untold Ireland. Now, today we have our season 1 finale with the long-awaited part 2 with the Peggy Delaney interview with my wonderful mother. I want to say a special thank you guys to everyone who's joined us during season 1 before we get the interview underway. And let's get started, guys. How are you doing today, Peggy? Welcome back to Untold. Now, the last time you joined us, we spoke a lot about kind of what it was like being blind on the farm and helping around the place and all that kind of a thing. Would you like to continue to elaborate on some of that, or will we talk about some of the shenanigans that would have went on?
Will we talk about some of the shenanigans?
Yeah, perfect, up to you.
And it was certified blind, not blind.
Certified blind, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will we talk about killing the pig?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, right. So when we were young, we always killed a pig in Tulloch. And it was a big day, do you know? It was a very hard day for the likes of my mother, but it was a big, big day. So we had a neighbour down the road called Danlo. They used to actually go around and kill pigs for people. So Danlo used to earn a few pounds by making blackthorn sticks, right? So I'm telling you this for a reason. So Danlo had an eye. He used to walk around the hedgerows and the ditches around the place, and he could see a stick in the making. So he would cut it down with his little saw or whatever, take it home, take all the small branches off it, and then he would oil it and polish it within an inch of its life, and make these beautiful sticks. So then he used to take them to town on a Friday, and during the summer he might go on a Wednesday and a Friday to sell them to tourists, and that's how he made an extra few bob for himself. But because this is what he was doing, Danlo's hands were always as black as the ace of spades. Right, so we'll move on to this story now. So Michael Lynch, a neighbour of ours, was walking past our place one day, and he said to Mom, Margaret, are you missing anything? And she said, no. And he said, are you sure you're not missing a few children? And Mom said, no, they're up with Mrs. Gill. And he says, I don't think they are. They're coming up the top of Harrington site, right? So they had struck off to town, they had a few pennies, and it was my two sisters, they had a few pennies. And every Sunday when we were going to Mass, big thingy, and Hickey's always had bicycles parked outside their house. So I suppose the girls got it in their head that they'd go to town and buy a bicycle because they were after being given a few pennies, right? So Danlo stopped them. Danlo's about a mile down the road. Stopped them, and my sisters hate this story. So what he actually done, asked them who they were. They weren't going to tell him because we don't have strangers. So what he decided to do was he stuck his big black thumbs into their mouths to check their age by how many teeth they had. Brought him home. Yeah. It's rough, isn't it? That's how you check for the age of other things, so why not children? But anyway, we'll move back to that.
That gets you in an awful amount of trouble these days.
Well, we'll go back to Danlo and the pig anyway. So
Yeah.
he used to come up, and there was a lot of preparation. You know, we always had a range, obviously, and there'd have to be loads of hot water boiling for killing the pig. But so he'd come up, the pig would be, its throat would be slit, right? So it would either be by a sharp knife if he had a sharp knife, or one of those cut-throat razors. So it'd be hung up, and the first job that would be done, it was obviously cut and gutted or whatever. But the first job Mom would have to do, which was her job, was wash the guts, washed the gut lining, the fat out of the guts, like.
Lovely.
Yeah, lovely. So this was a job that was done in the river. It was done in the river because there would be no other place to do it. Yeah, in the river, freezing. Like, this is why back in the day, people always had a river behind their house, alongside their house, close to the house. There was always reason for the river, like. But she'd have a pot inside there, and I don't know the logic behind this, but there would have to be rushes in the pot. Now, I'm guessing, so you would take the gut and you would have to take it, turn it inside out because the outside of the gut would be really smooth, like the top of the table, and the inside of the gut when you turn it out would obviously have lumps of fat in it. So you'd have to clean all the fat off. Now the rushes in the pot, that was passed on to Mom. She never really knew why, but I'm guessing maybe the fat stuck to the rushes or whatever. Now this was an awful job, as you can imagine. Cold water, peeling fat off the inside of a gut, right? But the rushes anyway, that you'd get it all, you would get the inside of the gut, the same as the outside of the gut, and then you would turn it out. So at this stage now, the pig had been bleeding for quite some time. So the next job would be for Mom. Next job for Mom would be to put the concoction for it to make puddings with the gut, like.
Yeah.
So it would have been macroom oatmeal,
Yeah.
obviously the blood, and they used to say spices, but it was salt and pepper and whatever else you wanted to add it yourself. So you would have to stuff that in whatever way you could,
Yeah.
into the gut of the pig. And then you would, same as you see in any of the nice flesh sausages or puddings you see now that are tied and hung, like 4, 8 of them together. And you do that and you tie them, and then you would throw them into a big pot of boiling water to cook them because they were a grey-like colour. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Right? Back in the day, So then you'd pierce them with a headpin or a needle or something, and if they went shh, it meant they weren't cooked properly, right? So that would have been, Mom used to have done that. Now she'd do that. She tried sausages and stuff, but they never worked out so well for her, like. But then the pig. So the pig would have to be, the boiling water was for shaving the pig. So you would have to shave the hair of a pig. Now I think, for some reason, I think the hair of the pig grows for so long after killing it. So really you're scalding the pig, trying to burn it to stop the hair growth, like.
Yeah.
Right? So then the kitchen...
I'm getting hungry. It's a bit grim, no?
The kitchen table, but this is what was done. The kitchen table was used for everything. There was an outside table, but
Yeah.
obviously Mom would make the puddings and everything else inside, and there'd be kind of butchery table. Some of the smaller cuts would be done in the table. So then you would... Now, we never, in our house, never ate some of the stuff of the pig. The way in Cork they eat a lot of crew beans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, we never touched it. Yeah, they were just, anything the dad, because we'd our own meat, because anything the dad deemed it was a bit shitty meat, we'll say for a better word, we didn't eat it.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate. But now we found other uses for it, but we'll get to them in a minute. But then you would cut the meat up into, once you'd it cleaned and everything else done to it, and all the hair burnt off, you would cut the meat into the different sections of meat. Now you would put some aside because you were going to give some to your neighbours, because that's what you'd done. So you would give some to your neighbours, and then the rest would go in a barrel. So the way it worked was you got the salt used to come in kg bags, and then you used to put, some people say they used to use brown sugar, but we always use brown sugar. So Mom would put, a layer of salt down on the bottom of the barrel, and then she would put a layer of brown sugar on top of it. And then you would cover all the bottom of it with meat, and then you would cover the whole thing again with a big layer of salt and brown sugar, and you would keep repeating that all the way to the top of the barrel. Now this preserved the meat, and it would eventually kind of turn into liquid by the time we got to the bottom of the barrel or whatever, because the sugar and salt, I suppose, melty or whatever. But it'd be very like those, them maple rashers and stuff you like. They kind of had that thing off it, like.
Yeah.
It was good feeding, like. So then that would have been shared out to neighbours and whatever. Now we killed sheep, but we would, and I won't say we killed lamb because we never ate lamb.
Yeah.
Around coming up Christmas, we had mutton, which is old sheep, or if there was, a lame weather or something like that, he'd be fattened and killed.
Yeah.
But there could be anything up to, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 sheep killed just before Christmas, because at Christmas time, Dad and Mum used to give out meat, as the way people give gifts at Christmas.
Yeah.
From Tully, you always got meat, or maybe meat and potatoes, or maybe a bit of veg, or bottle of whiskey if you're very close, like. But
Would
it was
it have
always
been
meat.
more common then to kind of kill a sheep and get mutton rather than lamb?
We never had lamb. Lamb is a modern day thing.
Yeah.
And the smell of mutton, no, none of you have ever smelled mutton. It was old sheep that weren't able to have lambs anymore, and or something hurt, its leg or
They just-
damaged eye, and it was because there was no waste, like. Fatten the animals up, keep them in and feed them, and then kill them. And then, give them out as presents. But it was mutton. It wasn't lamb.
Yeah.
He'd die if he had to eat mutton now. What's...
It's supposed to be a lot tougher, isn't it?
Well, it's a lot tougher, but you can cook it slow in the oven. Mom used to cook lovely mutton, like.
Yeah.
It's the smell is so strong in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know,
had
and-
mutton, it's stinky like stinky. I quite liked it.
Fair enough. How bad?
Yeah. I don't miss nothing, actually.
No chance of that popping up
No.
at Christmas dinner, no.
Yeah.
No. So now should we move on to, I don't know, that's kind of the
story of the pig, anyway.
story of the pig.
That's it.
If the day we were doing the pig, anyway, if there was pieces left over from the pigs, the pieces we wouldn't eat. If we had, we had a lot of visitors.
Yeah.
And, sometimes these things, if you knew someone was coming, you'd wait to kill the pig till then, because it was a big deal. Like.
Yeah.
And so, we would find uses for bits of the pig that we weren't going to eat or give to neighbours. So, we were gurriers, but at the same time, Dad was a messer, like. So we used to push it as far as we could. So if you had, we had people that used to come on honeymoon, so you had people that, come down from Dublin, they'd say they were going to stay a night in Tulloch, but they'd stay a few nights, or they'd come from England or America on their honeymoon. And we always left gifts in their bed. So you would, the tail, maybe. I think someone got the head once, but the head is very bulky in a bed, which crew beans aren't, the tails aren't, now, it just wasn't the pig, like. If there was someone home and they were, we were very respectful in some ways, because if it was an old person, we wouldn't do it, like.
Well, yeah,
if it was a young person, or a medium, or someone that was saucy to us, we were always, there was so many.
They had it
there was
coming, like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we felt they had it coming, like. But, we've put nettles down the bottom of the bed, so that when you get in and you're after a few drinks or something, your feet get stung with them, or...
What would be
Tis-
the reaction then by Nana and Grandad after that, then, if you do something like that? Like,
Well, Mum would tell us we'd want to cop onto herself, and Dad would tell us we want to cop onto herself, but would think it was hilarious. We never really got in trouble over it.
yeah, so,
because-
if he found it funny, it wouldn't be half as bad, like.
Yeah, but we were big house for water fights and all this kind of stuff. If you have 6 children running around and then you have visitors coming, and some people that were getting married were only Mom and Dad had to get a mobile home, because we used to have a lot of visitors. Now the mobile home, no, a visitor never stayed in a mobile home, God
Yeah.
forbid, because you'd have good sheets and everything for visitors, and that would be the one thing we might get in trouble over, because we had regular sheets and good sheets, and we sometimes destroyed them, like.
But
And
like
we-
the clothes and the mask clothes, like.
Yeah, it'd be like Mom, and Mom would be the one that had to clean them.
Yeah.
Or Sheila was a great housekeeper. Is a great housekeeper. But so we used to stay in the mobile home until they break the extension. So if there was too many people in the house, we'd be shut out into the mobile home because the visitors would always stay in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what we used to do with the bits of the pig, and we were evil like.
Could I ask, what was the people on the honeymoon's reaction?
Do you know something? They used to actually be so merry most of the time going to bed. It used to be the next day. Anyone who ever came on their honeymoon for one quick stopover visit because they felt they had to, always said for a minimum of like 4 or 5, sometimes a week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So which meant they didn't really have a problem.
Sure, why wouldn't they? Like, they'd be getting the free meat and then they'd go to bed, they get a bit more for dessert, like, you know? Sure.
Midnight snack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, it was just the way it was. So then we talk about the bog.
Yeah. Right, so, obviously coming from a big Irish family and growing up on a farm and all that stuff, the bog, cutting the turf. What was that like?
Oh, the bog.
The bog, yes.
The bog. So many people love the bog.
You always have to talk about the bog, like.
Well, the bog was a huge part of it because we had a range and it used to be lit 12 months of the year because that's how we cooked. So
Yeah.
we used to cut a load of turf. Now, the bog, first you'd go up, Dad would go up first and skin the bog. As we got older, Dad used to always mark it. He was a very neat man. If the bog wasn't in a straight line, he was not happy, like, because he was just neat. So you'd skin off the top of the bog. And maybe the day you skinned the bog, you might actually, we cut a bog in east up and in west up because the turf was like, the turf on one side of the mountain was actually more like coal. It was brickle-like, and it was...
Bit further along, like.
Yeah, the big chirons. It was just blacker.
Yeah.
So it had more heat out of it, like, as such. Mm-hmm. But, so you'd go up and you'd use a slan and cut the turf. That's why all of us can use a pike so well known, because Dad would cut the turf, put her up on the side, and then you would have to pick up the fresh turf and throw it out to the next person and maybe throw it out a bit further because we used cut so much. And then when it dried off, you'd put it up in stooks, and then when it had finished drying, you'd go with the trailer and collect it.
When you were cutting the turf up in the bog, would there have been anyone going up helping you cut the turf, or was it kind of all just, we're cutting our turf and this is our fuel, like, for the fire? Or?
A lot of families cut turf on our land, like.
Yeah.
Because not everybody had a mountain, like. So in our land up here, in east up and west up,
Yeah.
there would have been the Kerrys. They lived in town, so they had a bog up in ours. The Cronans, another town family, so they had a bog in ours. There was the Lynches down the road, used to cut in ours. The Luces, and ourselves. Now, I can't really remember them, but from a couple of families from the crossroads, obviously, done a bog up here too. But
Yeah.
I don't really know them. I can't remember that part of it.
And
But,
did everyone kind of have their own specific spot that they'd cut from, or?
yeah.
Yeah.
So you would... Obviously, a bog is where there's a mound of earth. And
Yeah.
So, you'd have your bog here, another bog here, another bog below the ray, whatever. So, but...
Would there have been any...
But people would help each other out, like,
Yeah.
especially if the weather was going to turn, or if your turf was ready and someone else's wasn't ready, they'd help you, so you'd help them. And because Dad had a tractor and trailer, and lots of people didn't, he would, deliver people's turf when it was finished or whatever.
And would there have been any funny stories from when you were cutting the bog, or with the schlang and the turf and the whole thing, like,
Oh my God, no, it really would teach you how to work if you'd done a couple of days in the bog.
Sure, I did the bog when I was younger. Like, once. But, I did it, like.
I was
Yeah, but it was
always known for
different.
cutting timber.
Yeah. But it was different then because you'd have a machine for cutting it.
Yeah.
But you know what was fantastic in the bog? You've never in your life tasted anything like it. So Mom used to make tea, and you'd either be left behind to bring up the tea afterwards, to bring it up so people could have a break in the middle of the day. And obviously, we didn't have flasks or anything, so uh, so it was tea leaves back then, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't tea bags. So we always had a big, massive teapot. You'd have the kettle and the teapot on the range, so that the tea could actually brew. But then Mom would make the tea in a jug, and she would put so much milk in it and oceans of sugar, right? And then she would put it in whiskey bottles, large whiskey bottles, and each whiskey bottle in the lid would be screwed on, and you would put it into two of Dad's willy socks or woolly socks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was to keep it warm. So then she would have sandwiches made up as well. So you'd rush up to the hill as fast as you could, because if the tea wasn't hot when you got there, you'd be killed.
It's a long walk as well, though.
Yeah, but again, Noel, we were faster back then.
I just forgot, The years go by, and they're just
So,
not as good,
So anyway, you've never ever tasted tea and a sandwich like a day in the bog.
Yeah.
It is something that, the way we were older, so you taste things sometimes or smell things, and they remind you of when you were young.
Nostalgic feeling, like.
Yeah, the tea in the bog, you could still taste it, and the sandwiches were always fabulous. Like, no more. I suppose you were starving, but it was you just all sit around and have your tea and your.
I'd say at
and-
that stage you'd eat kind of plain bread and think it was gourmet,
No, but we never got plain bread in the bog. And Mom made. We never had bought bread. Mom used just get a bowl and throw in flour and milk or whatever and measure things out. Nothing was measured out. She just threw in a mug of this, a mug of that, whatever, push it all together, throw it into the oven in the range, and she used to make brown bread, white bread, cornmeal bread, porter bread, and that's what we ate. We were fed really well. Like.
Shorty Cronin and Michael Healy-Ray were saying that actually that there would have been a lot more of you'd buy ingredients for things rather than actually you just go into the shop now and you buy a slice pan, then your block of butter and you'll be done with that. That it would have been a lot more common for people to kind of buy their flour and and make the bread themselves.
Yeah. We were much older when every Friday, and we were teenagers, when we'd get one round brown loaf from Moriarty's bakery. And by the time when they'd come home from town on Friday, it'd be put up on the table. Daddy'd get to have what he wanted out of it, and the rest of us were like scavengers.
Yeah.
Because it was so good. But now, in actual fact, I'd love if Mom was baking now all the time, because the food we were eating was fantastic. Well, we didn't know it, But
That real kind of home cooked meal,
Yeah, and Mom used just throw them together and throw them in. It was always fabulous, because she was at it every day.
What could you tell us? Any funny stories that went on in the bog?
Well, lots of messing, of course, went on in the bog. When the men used to be sitting around having a break or whatever, we used just exploring or whatever, messing. But as we got older, so we used to have fun in the bog too. But as we got older, I'll remember this one occasion, which I was killed over. Oh my God, I was killed over it. We were going up. So you go to collect the turf in a tractor and trailer, right? And it was a tipper trailer back then where, had a big pole in the front of it. And we used to actually stand in the back of the trailer and just do this balancing act to see who could stay standing or whatever over the rocks going up the hill.
Yeah.
But, going up towards one part up, we call it the rock, no one would be standing because it was quite dangerous, so you'd sit down, right? And Dad used to always sing in the tractor, so he'd be driving along and he'd be singing away, and whoever he was bringing up along to us would be going up collecting the turf, And this day anyway, I wanted the tipper thing, right? And because I couldn't see as well as the rest of them, so I wanted the tipper thing. And we're getting older now, so one of my more boisterous brothers anyway decided I couldn't have the tipper thing. And, I was told to get lost or whatever. So when I was sitting down on the side of the butt of the trailer, I have no idea why it was probably there to fix something or something that wasn't, working correctly or whatever. But there was a pliers, we'll call it a pliers, but it didn't turn out to be a pliers in the ground. So I started nipping the back of my brother with it every time, I'd go near him. I would try and catch him with the nip of the thing, and I was being told, get lost and, cop on and all this. So when we went over the rock, right, it wasn't pliers, it was actually a vice grips. So when we went over the rock, obviously the jerk of the rock made the thing when I would like this, it didn't release and it locked. So it locked on to the buttocks of one of my brothers.
Yeah.
Now you would hear him roaring in town, absolutely roaring in town. Dad he went up once, he heard the screaming, he stopped, then there was this big hullabaloo that my brother had a vice grip stuck to his ass. Yeah, I nearly got killed. I obviously didn't do it intentionally, but that's kind of, well, my childhood was like, if it could go wrong, I was going to do it wrong.
Yeah.
But but other than that, we had a hay shed. We had a big, massive hay shed, the size of what a standard hay shed is now, and that used to be the turf shed. And we fill it up to the top with turf. That's kind of the bog. And then all the people from town that had their bogs, they dwindled out over the years.
Yeah. Because it is kind of a finite resource as well. There's only so much bog overall the country.
There's still plenty bog.
Well, yeah, but at some point,
Yes, yeah. Now that we live in the world we live in,
Yeah.
But, you never know. People.
We're all about renewable energy these days and everything.
Might go back at the bog yet.
Maybe in a couple of years, the bog will be built up again. So, moving on from the bog anyway.
Okay.
What could you tell us about the silage? And kind of just
Well,
any crack that would have went on with the brothers and...
Well, the silage when we were young, it used to be the round bales like the lads have now. It was a pit silage. So you would have a metal bin. That's a punch bin now.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have a metal bin would come for the day of the silage. So here we would have had, John Gill, our neighbour, and we would have had Mike and Paddy Lynch maybe, and Dennis and John McCarthy, maybe Denny Shea, Jeff Lewis, I think Johnny Toohey.
Mm.
And I'll see Paddy Cronin, I remember him there once because he did cut the sleeve off my red dress when I broke my arm.
Oh, well.
But the way we used to work was, so a pit was, there still is pits made, but they're made with the harvester now or whatever. And I don't know, I think now they're in kind of walls. So it used to actually just be like a rectangular thing with a slope on it. So you'd have different people for different jobs. So in our place, we would have had, say, Dad and Mike Lynch and Dennis McCarthy across the way used to be the tractor driver, say. And then you would have someone like John McCarthy. He would have been in charge of, he was a very neat man. He used to just keep it pared and shaped perfectly. And then the other men, what they used to do was the buck rake would go up and it would be put into rows and the buck rake would back up and pick up like a cock of grass and then drive it up. And then the men used spread it out. And then we used to put molasses on it, which is, molasses is still molasses, but it's like treacle to make the silage sweet for the cows. It was a thing back then. I think it kind of is a fad that's gone like.
Mm-hmm.
But so then we would be in the field picking up the scraps because again, Dad was a very neat man. Just like when we'd finish in the bog, there wouldn't be a chiron left of it. He'd want it spotless.
Yeah.
But the same with the silage, we would have to walk along with a pike and pick up the scraps. This was actually at the silage one year that Auntie May, Sister Cabrina, was home. Was the first time that I ever realised that a holy person was just a person, because we were reared that they were, and someone you had to respect.
infallible
or whatever.
figures, like.
Well, I don't know. Like Auntie May used to love farming when she came home.
Yeah.
But we were picking up doing the silage this time. She was home anyway, and Michael Lynch. It was Michael Lynch. There was myself and her were picking up the scraps after Mike. Like so, and there used to be a certain amount of scraps, but when you drive away with your little cock of grass or whatever, you know, you were meant to be tidy. So she stopped Mike anyway, and she was getting crosser and crosser every time he went. And she stopped him and she wanted a word with him. And it was the first time I'd ever heard a sister actually picking a few very good choice swear words and hopping him off Michael Lynch and telling him to cop on and tidy himself up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but silage was great crack as well then, like, you know, because it was just fun. You know, we worked, but it was fun. And then obviously there would be a couple of meals during the day.
Yeah.
Mom would put on a great spread. You know, everyone was well fed, well watered. They'd have, you know,
Sandwiches and kind of the same thing with the whiskey bottle and the tea.
No, because it was being made near home.
Oh, sure, it was only out the door, yeah.
They'd come into the kitchen. So they'd come into the kitchen and no, it wouldn't be sandwiches. Mom would always put a plate of food or whatever up in front of everybody. And they'd have breaks during the day and there'd be bottles of drink brought out from Mahoney's pub. So everyone would be watered and well fed. And that was the story in Tulloch. That's what they'd done with the silage.
Would you have any other funny stories of anything that went on while you were cutting the silage, or is it all very cut and dry?
Nice bun.
Nice. So obviously we had lots of fun at the silage or whatever, but any standout stories? I could tell you another one of my mishaps.
Yeah.
If you would like one of my mishaps. So at one period of time they started feeding, I think people, it was kind of widespread across the country, I'm not 100% sure, where we started feeding the sheep silage during the winter. There was, I don't know, was there a hay shortage or something? But it turned out you couldn't do it anyway because animals started getting sick maybe a year or two down the line, and it was something to do with the PK in the silage or something. But anyway, this was another one of, so we were moving up in the years again, maybe I was a young teenager or something, and there was obviously something on the Sunday that I was going to be useless at anyway. So Dad decided that I would feed the sheep up the hill, up Wishton, right? And we're back to again me being visually impaired.
Yeah.
But I had my sidekick, that younger brother that proved so bad so many times. But so I used, once we were tall enough at all to hit the pedals, because it was 125 Massey Ferguson, which, you know, they're very basic to drive.
Were you certified blind driving the tractor?
I was.
Oh, Christ.
But I was very good at it.
I still can't get my license.
Johnny, my brother used to sit up on the mudguard
Yeah.
and tell me which way to go. But we went up anyway, and I was never mad about going up the hill because the hill was where I stuck the vice grips on my other brothers behind, like.
Yeah.
Which meant it was a bad road, like. So you go to the silage and you'd fill the box with silage and then you would take it up the hill, right? So I would head off. You wouldn't be going 1,000 miles an hour. It's only a tractor, like.
Yeah.
A tractor from back in the day. And I would drive along and it was very easy, you know, sometimes because it was green. You just followed the pattern. Then if I was going off, my brother would just kind of go, Peggy, this way, or pull me and say this way or whatever. But my brother had started to talk an awful lot. He was gone into his story time, you know, so he'd be, I'd be driving along and he'd be telling me something and not paying attention to what we were doing. But before they ever got off from Mass, we were actually back down the house because when we went up to the hill gate and up a bit further, there was, you know, a bit of a fall off to the left of the road. And my sidekick wasn't doing his job properly, so I turned the tractor over off the side of the road. Right?
Yeah.
So luckily I didn't kill him. you know, because we were fortunate that we had a cab on our tractor. Like, now if we hadn't had a cab, it would be a different story. Yeah, a cab with doors. You know, so we were very flash. But
There won't even be Untold Ireland, I'd say. You know.
but yeah, so I didn't drive off the road. I slipped gracefully
Right.
off the embankment down
Okay.
onto the side.
Very lady.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, once I had made sure he was okay or whatever, we decided we couldn't do a bit with it, right, obviously. So we left the hill and walked down home. And Mom saw us coming down the yard from the back kitchen window and decided to come out and say, "Stay there, do not come in," right? Because they hadn't went to Mass yet. So she came out when they had went to Mass to see, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "We drove tractor off the road, like, you know, 2 of you are okay, I'll get it sorted." So she went and found a neighbour to pull the tractor out so the tractor could be down home before she could actually tell Dad
Yeah.
that he's not driving anymore. That's an end to that now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah,
Who would have thought that getting the blind girl to drive the tractor would have been a bad idea? Which I would have never seen that coming at all now.
but see, Dad found it very, very hard to accept that I couldn't see, like, because
Oh,
I
yeah?
functioned extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it wasn't something that, you know, he just, you know,
Yeah.
it was like
It would
another.
kind of slip his mind sometimes. So like, oh, maybe she can't do this or something like that. Like,
Well, I have
because
big massive bottles on my eyes, Noel. People presumed I could see.
fair enough.
Right, well, we move along.
Yeah. So, while we're on the topic of just farming and what might as well be stereotypes with the turf
Okay.
and the silage and everything, would you tell us a bit about the spuds, the potato farming?
Great.
Yeah.
So the spuds. Now we used to plant, again, an awful lot of spuds. Anything up to an acre of spuds, believe it or not. Now you know this site here that you're in now is a half acre. So it would be twice the size of this. So we used to plant several of it. No, they weren't all ours.
Yeah.
Because we used to plant potatoes, but also there was the Connors family in town had potatoes for the year here. The Cronins had potatoes for the year. The Luces used to take some.
So it'd be the kind of the same thing as the bog where everyone would have their own select patch, like.
And the Kerrys, no, they would all be done together. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no select patch as such, but they used. Well, I think the Cronins used to take theirs home, but everybody else, it was just left in Tulloch. We had a house. Mom's home place was the designated potato house, like. So there'd be potatoes in the main kitchen, and there'd be potatoes in the sitting room, and then all the different potatoes would have a plank between them, and because they were different types of potatoes.
Yeah.
But the potatoes, right? When we were younger, there was a man down the crossroads, and his name was Paddy O'Brien, and he used to have one of those, you know, those big, beautiful black and white horses.
Yeah.
So he used to bring up his horse on the day of the potatoes, getting the drills ready for the thing. Again, they had to be in perfect lines. You know, the garden had to look neat.
Yeah.
Right, we had our vegetable garden, which was Mom's affair, and then we had the big garden, which was Dad's affair. So you would make the ridges with Paddy O'Brien's horse, beautiful horse. Paddy just drop it up, and he'd lend it the neighbours or whoever wanted to use it. So you do the drills with the horse, and Dad used to do that, obviously. And then you would plant your potatoes. We were all taught how to plant potatoes. Well, number one, the seed was coming from last year's potatoes. So we would, before you plant potatoes a while beforehand, you would have went through the potatoes that were left, anything that had a stalk coming in it or whatever, you would put them in boxes and layer them up so they wouldn't be squashed. So you were giving the stalk a period of time to grow and flourish, right? And then we were all taught how to plant them correctly because it had to be done right, and what distance to put between them, right? So then you would leave. Did the drills be closed the same way? Now things changed as time went on. Like But Dad liked working with the horse to make things neat and perfect and whatever, But I think he was closing with some sort of a tractor thing, but it didn't matter once it was perfect when it was starting.
Yeah.
But then the potatoes would grow. Oh, so when we'd plant a load of you call them turnips, we used to call them Swedes.
Mm-hmm.
And we would plant mangels, which were feed for cows or feed fodder for animals.
What's a mangle, ma'am?
Well, a mangle is a thing like, well, it was kind of whitish, and I don't know if you can get mangles anymore, but farmers used to actually plant them for fodder, like for feed.
Yeah.
Like with the Swedes, there'd be so many Swedes but we used to plant masses of, because you'd add them to the food for extra nourishment to the animals when you'd be feeding the animals over the winter.
Yeah.
So you'd grow them, and obviously the Swedes and the mangles or whatever, we'd weed them and take care of them while they were growing, and then obviously the picking and the potatoes. Now that was a big affair, like, because everyone had to get all hands on board for the picking of it, because we planted so many, like, So Dad used to actually drive through with the potato picker, and like everything else, he wanted nothing left behind. It had to be done neat.
Perfect.
Yeah, he was a very tasty man. Hence all the fields around us, So he would want it done proper. So we used to fill them into manure bags or net bags or whatever, and then they would be brought up to Granda's old house, and they would be put out on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Now the potatoes didn't end there, so that you would think is, so then you would have to change where you planted the potatoes. You couldn't keep the potatoes in the same place every year, because there wouldn't be any nourishment to the ground.
Yeah, you grew in the ground, like.
Yeah, you'd be taking too much. So the garden had to be moved around, like. So then it wouldn't finish there, because over the winter you had to go through these blasted potatoes in case there was a smell of a bad spud. God forbid my nose would smell bad, hence my heightened smell. It never served me well where potatoes were concerned.
Yeah.
Because you had to pick all the rotten spuds out of the spuds and go through them. And I was on great sight, so very often I had my fingers stuck through those dirty spuds before.
You'd even realise they were gone, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the end of the year, the whole cycle would start all over again.
Now, would you have any funny stories about them? I know we're kind of like a broken record here now, kind of name topic, funny stories, but
Well, I wouldn't say it is funny. Obviously, you see, it was everyday fun we had.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will tell you another mishap if you want to hear a mishap.
Oh yes, these are always interesting.
So
We love your mishaps.
You love mishaps. Well, one of the jobs I could do, and that I didn't get in trouble with, was, I said that we used to grow turnips and mangels for fodder, like.
Yeah.
So they had to, around the country you see these things like a big massive mincer, a hand mincer that you go like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see them in people's yards. They have a handle and like a half bucket in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were for pulping, like.
Yeah.
So you'd throw in the Swede or the mangle or whatever, and you'd go like this, and it'd come out the bottom of your bucket under it, and you'd pulp it, like. And then you'd throw that to the animals with their feet, like. So I don't know, I used to be sent up to the shearing shed, because that's where that thing used to be, and I used to have to get this pulp ready, right? And I don't know, did I take it upon myself, or was I actually sent to the inch?
Mm-hmm.
Was I just sick to death of pulping, like? But you know what an inch is? An inch is a field with water on three sides, so you only have one entrance to.
Yeah.
That's where the name comes from. So I must have taken it upon myself. I must have taken it upon myself, because otherwise they'd known where to look for me. But I went to the inch to feed some animals. I was probably doing something good, because that's what you do when you're young, like. And but I never came home. But I never got home because I got stuck, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a search party out. So what had happened was dusk is a very hard time to see. You know, the way you don't like it by night.
Yeah, I
You know,
hate driving during it, yeah.
Yeah. So when you use colour for clarity, dusk is an awful time. So I would have went down the inch, probably got carried away in, you know, the la la land mind of mine.
Yeah.
And when I was coming out, roughly knew where the gap was, but I obviously went wrong, you know, a couple of clicks to the left or whatever. So I walked into like branches or whatever. So then I tried to walk out of the branches, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 meters, maybe I make it a bit small. There was a patch anyway of brambles and sallies and whatever.
Oh.
And I walked into them. And as I tried to walk out of them,
Yeah.
I obviously kept walking more into them. And now it's dusk, so there's no clarity with paths or nothing or, you know, anything. So eventually, because I was going to destroy my face because I was getting awkward, I just had to stand there until people came looking for me. But now it must have been a big enough because there's a guard down the road here and he was with them looking for me too. So there must have been, unless he was visiting, quite a few people were looking for me. So I must have taken it upon myself to
Feed the animals.
feed the animals.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just Dad, it was me too, like. You know, I was going to be soon. But you know, we'll change stories slightly. This lovely man that was part of that helping.
The search party.
The search
or-
party
yeah.
was the search party, yeah.
Yeah.
Search party.
Call it what it is, like.
Peggy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, you know, hints where it is again, it's quite dangerous, like.
Yeah.
You know. But another thing that was found out that was one of my great abilities when I was young was, you know, the electric fence.
Yes.
So electric fence when we were young was slightly different. Now you put it in a peg. Back in the day, you used to have to drive a stake and move it when you'd be putting cattle into sections or whatever. So Dad used to actually, God, I hated this job too. Like, you know, holding a post while it was being a stake while it was being hammered down because it was send shakes through you. Like that was something I could do. And the other thing I could do was I never had to touch the electric fence because I could hear it. There was ticks in it. So you'd know between the ticks when to catch it and then you wouldn't get a shock like it. Now you get a shock, but it wouldn't be like when you handle an electric fence. So Dad used to always be saying, how do you know the electric fence is on, like Becky? And I'd say, because I can hear it, like. So then if you were going over a gap or something, Dad had put it up high so the animals could go under. Now he realised this when he was actually, lifted me up one day and asked me to check the electric fence. And then he was saying, oh my God, Peggy, let it go. Or he was swearing at me, saying, let it go. But the shock runs through you and hits the person in the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right? So then that used to be one of my party tricks as I was getting older. You know, if we went for a walk and, you know, because of course I got a raw deal from some people. So I'd say the electric fence wasn't on.
Yeah.
And then say, and hold it, because I could, and hold it with my hand, like just go, it's not on, it's not on.
And then
I'd
it's hold my hand there.
hold my hand there.
Yeah.
Or leave it off between their legs if they were going over it, like, which was so mean. So funny. But this lovely man that was in the search party then one day, and we had Mom's garden in front of the house. We were doing something down there and he stopped at the top of the road and said, you know, it's this thing on rather than walk up to the yard and down. And this was Dad being a messer again, said, no, it's not, like. And he goes, are you sure it's not on, like? Because people are terrified of it. I think the shock might have been stronger back in the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, no, it's not on, like. And excuse me, this particular man goes, well, I don't trust you. So Dad said, go over there, Peggy. Show him it's not on. Show him it's not on. So I went over, I got the electric fence, held it and said, it's not on. Well, he climbed over it and got caught on either side of the electric fence. It was so bad. It was so bad. Now, it was so funny. Dad was responsible. I slightly got killed because someone had to be killed. But yeah, it was very funny. But, yeah.
Right. Moving away from all the kind of stereotypical farm talk, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Yes.
With how much of our family will be over in America, Could you tell us what it was like kind of when they'd come home or when they'd send the parcels back home or anything like that?
Well, all the parcels from
Yeah.
America were brilliant, like.
Mm.
Yeah. We used to get, Mom never bought us a stitch. Well, online, she probably bought us socks and knickers. But she never bought us a stitch because we were dressed from America and England.
Yeah.
So we had, now Auntie Bridie's boys were much older, she had boys, so they were kind of past us. But Auntie Harriet had 10 children, and her youngest was kind of at the start of ours, like. So Auntie May as well, the nun, she used to actually send us clothes too. Auntie Margaret, when she'd come from England, because she was coming more often, she would just bring us, stuff with her. The parcels from America, lads. Now you can hardly, it's so expensive to post anything now.
Yeah.
But these things used to come so frequently. So there'd be a big box, right, a brown box wrapped brown paper. And we were always warned, you're not allowed to open the parcel
Yeah.
till Mom says you can. Because we'd be trying to get whatever we wanted out of it. First comes, first served. Because we used to kill each other over the clothes. No, we still didn't want to share. Now, when I was young, I was obviously younger than my sisters, so I got hand-me-downs for everything. But by the time I made my communion, I wore one of my sisters' communion dresses because they made it together, and it was miles too short for me because I was way taller than them at this stage. So it was tall. I kind of got first dibs all the time, and then they used to send special stuff we wanted. But now not everything worked out well, because obviously when you're young you wear whatever you're told, and that's it. And then as you start to get a bit older, you're kind of like, oh good God, I'm not wearing that, Mom. Oh, but you are, because it's warm.
Yeah.
This thing. Things never change. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember going down as far as Michael Knight's Cross and taking off my coat in the morning and actually leaving it on a rock and getting drowned going to school, getting drowned walking home, putting on my coat, Michael Knight's Cross, and walking home. And I was no different than my siblings, like.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff was very American-like. But
What do you mean?
the Stone was very different, like.
Mm-hmm.
They had a lot more stuff. They had a lot of blouses, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of blouses. And they had some really cool stuff as well, like, someone would go, oh my God, where did you get that? You'd be trying to think, oh, my mom got it, I don't know where, because you weren't going to be going, well, we're actually dressed from parcels from America.
Yeah. We're very bougie, like, we get our clothes in the post.
Yeah, because all that was changing.
Yeah.
But Mom and Dad had brought us, especially Mom had brought us up in a way that was maybe now traditional, maybe.
Yeah.
Because as I said before, you were talking about the parcels from America and they were great. All our jewellery, we had very cool jewellery, all that kind of stuff. Eyeshadows, all that stuff. But eyeshadow in our day, people only wanted blue eyeshadow and pink lipstick. That was it. But we had, when we were young, like, Mom's, as you know, Mom has, I said before, Mom had no immediate family. And all Dad's immediate family immigrated. So it sounds like we were very lost here, but we weren't, because all Mom's mother's family, so Mom's mother would have died when she was young, but her mother's family, all of them were around here, like, so between Bannon, Killarney and the Valley. Mm-hmm. So they were all around. So there was 21 first cousins of Mom's in the locality. And some of them were our age. So because Mom was much older, her mother was the oldest, and she was much more, older than a lot of them, like.
Yeah.
But we used to go around to their house, screeching. That's how you were asking me, how do we pass the time? We used to go visiting, like. Yeah. So they used to visit us. Hence how people, used to come on holidays during marriages and whatever, like. Mm-hmm. We used to go visiting them by night, and they used to come visiting us. And obviously, if there was a station or ball night, you would have all your extended family, which were all our cousins that we called our granddads, and uncles, uncle and aunt, because that's what they were, because we weren't. So mom would have had 21 first cousins in the locality. So they would have been in Banon, Killarney, Banon, Killarney, Kirkle and the Valley. So we used to go visiting them, and they'd visit us, and I think we were actually, we loved them dearly. They were all our first cousins, like.
Yeah.
And we still love them dearly. But I think we were brought up quite sheltered, like.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think we were brought up quite sheltered.
Would there be any reason for that, or?
I think some of it, a lot of it maybe was the times, but I think a lot of it would have been mom's upbringing, that it was an overflow of that, like.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, say mom was brought up the road here. So there would have been mom and her father. Once her mother died, there was mom and her father. So she depended on her aunts and uncles and first cousins. That was the first reason. And then you had times were different, which you don't realise how different they were. All these things I'm going to mention have happened in my lifetime, and I'm only 52. So say mom would have got married. So mom would have got married, and she would have obviously owned a farm. So she would have had the farm up the road here. And when she got married, the rights of that farm went to dad. She no longer had any rights, and that was the law. There was very little women's rights, like. So
It was called a dowry or something, wasn't it?
no. Yeah, you were given a dowry, but
Yeah,
it
like-
was even if you didn't have a dowry. Okay, say she didn't come with a dowry.
Yeah.
We'll call it that, right? When you got married,
Think I might be going back a
When-
bit too far, but
no,
it's alright.
no, you're not going back too far, because there was dowries.
Mm.
But when you were in a position of land ownership or whatever, and you got married, everything was owned by the man. The children were owned by the man. The woman had no rights. Where they came later. The world has, then there would have been, like, you talk about, the world of today, and some of your age group go on about how hard they have. And I have how hard they have it. And I do believe some people have it hard. But they don't have it hard in the same way women especially had it back in the day. Not only women. You have to remember, women had no rights. Gays had no rights. If you got in trouble, oh my dear Lord, and you had a baby, that was just, you were sent off. People my age group were sent to mother and baby homes to have babies. People my age group were absolutely crucified for their sexuality. And there's no point saying they weren't. And I am only 52. There was no law and no legislation for anyone's, I can't remember the year that women started to get rights in the sense of that kind of thing. I'll tell you a local story here, right? And this would be maybe another reason mom used to be quite hard on us, especially the girls. We were well told off to behave ourselves, and well told off not to get in trouble, like.
Mm-hmm.
And there would have been a lady in the Glen here, right, who lived in her house, in our family home with whoever in her family, and someone would have climbed in the window to her one night and interfered with her.
Oh.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not my story. I don't know if I should be telling, but this is a history lesson for you, because we're not going to name no one. So she was interfered with. So she found herself pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So this woman was sent to Killarney to the county home. So in the county home, she had her baby. Now, a lot of these women were left there. They were left in the county home, right? And they never saw the light of day as such again. But you had the option. People back then, which just sounds so surreal now, could go in, and if you needed someone to help, or, so this family anyway went in, and they had younger children or whatever, and took this lady out of the county home to be a nanny as such. Now, as it happened, she had a lovely life. You know, they treated her really well. She was one of the family and everything else. But she didn't get to keep her son. He continued in the county home. So another family, after a period of time, would have actually taken him out of the county home because they needed help in their premises, we'll say, because I don't want to say too much. So they took him out, you know, to help with jobs or whatever. Now, some women, both of these people ended up with really good lives, right? They were very fortunate. She never came back to the Glen, like, you know, which is so sad.
Yeah.
And she never got to keep her baby or have him. Now, I don't know if they connected later on because they were both, you know, near enough in the in the scheme of things. But what was true of it, you know, it's the wording. She was interfered with. Now, we can put a lot of today's words on that, but it'd be a bit more harsher than interfered with.
Start to finish, not a single decision or choice that was made by her.
Absolutely
And
not,
they had
because
complete control of her life, and that is actually terrifying to think about when you actually think about it.
yeah. So it's kind of another version of the mother and baby homes. You know, I don't know, does the county home in Clarny, you know, fit in that category? But some women were taken out of there and families took them out for jobs or whatever, and they were treated appallingly. Because these women, even if they hadn't willingly performed in the act of actually getting pregnant, they were branded like, and they were shamed and they were everything else. So because there was a lady so close, as years went on, like my mother used, this was when we were young, like my mother used, when this lady's family used to come home on holidays, my mother used to drive the family members to see this lady. And mom used to never get out of the car, and they used to go and visit her, and she was doing great, and she was so happy, and there was all of these different things. But the fact of the matter was, she was actually, her life was stolen from her, like, absolutely. And her child's life was stolen from her. Now, a few simple things. Now, so mom used to have us well warned. Absolutely, we were not going to get in trouble. You know, we knew from when we were very young, especially the girls, that if we got in trouble, which was the word, not pregnant, if we got in trouble, we were going to be banished. Like, it wasn't going to fare well for us, and we would bring such shame to the family. Now, it seems barbaric and ludicrous, but that's the way it was. So we were reared like that. Now, there was, you know, like a friend of mine actually that got pregnant, and, you know, people used to go to England and it wasn't so nice. And she actually went to England 3 times, and mentally she couldn't handle it afterwards, and, you know, she ended things. Now, people, it was the society caused that, like, because there was no acceptance. Now, sometimes when I listen to some of the things that he'd be carrying on with, you know, and some of your peers and your friends, when the laws were all put in place for equal rights and everything else, he's slightly bending them, you're finding holes in them, you're, you know, just going a step too far with things. Now, everyone is entitled to their own sexuality. If you're gay, you're gay. If you're lesbian, if you're bisexual, if you're trisexual, if there's such a thing, if you're whatever in the hell you are, if you've no sexuality whatsoever, that is absolutely fine. But sometimes he push your beliefs on the likes of us, right? Who gave you all them rights in the beginning? We voted for you to have all these rights. And then it's like as if you're trying to split hairs. Like as if in some way, it's not enough. If you split something too many times, it'll break. And he should be able to see that with what's going on in the world. So where everyone should be treated equal, some of the stuff your peers go on with is nonsense. Like, you know, it's just nonsense. Because what was happening in our day, even when I was young, it was cruel, it was unfair, and it was barbaric, like.
Lack of a better word, disgusting. Like,
Yes, and I know
Yeah.
times has changed. You know, even simple things. I would have had Aisling when I was Ashling's 24. So I would have had her when I was 27. She's going on 25, right, or whatever. And when I was working in the nursing home at the time and Floribet's Bar by night, and I got pregnant with Aisling, and obviously I wasn't married. And it was, even I, because of the way I was reared and things had seriously moved on, it was a hard call to come home and say I was pregnant. Then the fact that I didn't want to get married, but as you know, you have John's name, because I was saying, you know, you could go a step too far, you know, or
Yeah.
whatever. But then so I had Aisling and I'd signed up for maternity. And then when, excuse me, afterwards I would, sorry, then afterwards I would have it down, you know,
take your time.
to try and stay off work for a bit longer, because Ashley would have been a bit sick when she was born. And the forms that you fill out that have other in it now were single or married, you know. So I was inside. So as a single person back in the day, back in our day, you were entitled to unmarried mother's allowance, which you are now, I suppose. But there was no cohabiting. So I used to say to them, well, I'm not single. You know, I live with John. But you're a single mother, so you're entitled to A, B, and C, and D. And I'd go, well, I'm not. I don't want A, B, C, and D because I'm living with John and I'm not doing this whole dance. So every time I filled out a form, I used to draw a square box and write cohabiting in it. Now, people used to tell me I was nuts because I kept saying, well, we're not married. I don't want to get married, but I'm not single.
Yeah.
Right? So I was feeling cohabiting. So then do you remember when Aisling was in first or second year? Now, to say that cohabiting wasn't even wrote in a form down in the welfare office
Kind of speaks volumes.
24 years ago
Yeah.
says so much of how the world has changed. Because now we have, I go, oh my God, you're asked so many things now. What you are, you know, you're nearly asked what you like for breakfast. You know, where your sexuality is concerned.
We won't go into that much, but yeah.
Yeah. But where was I go? Oh, but Aisling in school then. So Aisling, like that poor boy that was in the county home, like so many others, if any woman that kept a son or a daughter without a husband or a partner back in the day, they should be admired so much. Now, there was no choice with so many other women. They were just carted away, whether it was their fault or not.
Against her will, like, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, when I used to be telling you this when he was young, and I would say, if he used the word bastard, like, I'd go, that is an awful word. Now, it was an awful word because those boys and girls were called bastards, like, and it was with such harshness. Even things like,
It was the meaning behind it, which, you know,
Yeah.
when you kind of say it nowadays, that meaning kind of doesn't really matter as much.
no, it doesn't mean,
You know?
it doesn't even come into now.
Yeah.
So you'd go like, God, didn't he turn out well for a bastard?
Jesus Christ.
You know,
Fucking hell.
that's what people you say. It was absolutely nuts, like.
Yeah.
But when Aisling was in first year, then in second year or whatever, you know, obviously I've always been telling you stories, but they were talking in school one day and they actually realised that there was so many people in her class because they were kind of the start of it, you know, maybe a year or two before it. But by Aisling's class, there was quite a few children in her class that were either from cohabiting parents like Aisling or from single moms. So they actually created the Bastard Club. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember this
The
now.
Bastard Club. And the first time Nana heard it, she went, that is just so wrong. And I'd go, we're bastards, Nana.
Sure, actually thought it was the funniest thing ever.
I
Like,
thought it was so funny.
Yeah.
But it just shows you, in such a small frame of time, how the world has changed. Now, you're living in a very, very good country. It has really bad points. Some of the stuff, now, everyone's welcome. Like with the wars, the way we've opened the country to people, I don't like the way the politicians have done everything, but it is the correct thing to do.
Yeah, it's just they're kind of taking it a step too far, we'll say.
No, do you know what it is, Noel? There's always going to be some crowd of people that get fat on the misery of others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what has happened here. You know, some people, because they were in a position of wealth to have, you know, big properties or lots of properties or whatever, they have got fat on this. But other people, now lots of people took in people from other countries and are helping them out, and they're doing it from the kindness of their heart, and rightly so. But what you have to remember is it is important to be kind to these people, if at all possible. And that they don't have it good. They're, you know, they'll have stories like the story I told there when they're in 30 years' time. And what ye have to try and remember, you basically have a good country. It has problems, but what you all have is rights, which weren't there in my lifetime. When I was younger, they weren't there. And to be careful not to fight battles that are, if a battle is just for the sake of having a battle, don't have it. It's just a waste of your energy and time. It's just simple. It's what simpletons do. Just try not to do it. And on that note,
Yeah. We still haven't got onto how you got the site back at all. Do you know? So chances are we'll probably be back here for a third interview with you. But I'm sure neither of us will mind anyway. It's not like we're actually going out of the way, it's the kitchen table, like, do you know?
Hi.
You basically live down the road as well, you like. But would you come back for a third one?
we'll do a really short interview on the miracle
Yeah.
of getting your sight.
We'll do like a 20-minute short the next day, I
Yeah.
would say.
That will be Expose episode 2.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining us again, ma'am. You should be ever so lucky. You were the finale of season 1, you know?
Well, you're very welcome.
Yeah. And yeah, just thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job.
Your class, Peggy.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching the season 1 finale of Untold Ireland. Obviously, we have to give a special thank you to everyone who's joined us during season 0 and season 1. All 9 of you, we cannot express the level of gratitude we feel towards all of you. Whether it be Magella, John Egan, Garrett Power, Jean McGarrald, Michael Healy-Ray, Jory Cronin, John Kelly, Eddie Moore, and obviously as well, my wonderful mother who has joined us for part 2 and the season finale. Yeah, I cannot put into words how thankful. We're just so thankful. Aren't we so thankful, Tom? Tom, get in here and say thank you.
We are very thankful.
Very thankful. Obviously, you know the drill, guys. All the social medias are down below in the description. We've got TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, Twitter, or X. No, we don't. Stop with this. Yeah, we're going to be taking a 2-week break, guys, so you won't have any Untold for 2 weeks while we get all of our affairs in order for season 2. But of course, season 2 will drop with a bang. We're going to try bring you some of the best interviews you've ever seen flat in your entire life. Some of the most amazing interviews ever. And
We're also going to try and evolve the quality of the videos and
Yeah.
all of that.
yeah, so we're going to try and do everything, guys. We're going to try up budget, you know, everything you can think of. But we're going to be flat out, lads. But I would just like to say thank you very much to everyone who's been watching the videos. And thank you very much for joining us for season 1 and season 0. And season 2 will come out. We'll have more exposés for you. We'll have more interviews. We'll, you know,
Other forms of content.
other forms of content. We also have started our new behind the scenes series known as Untold Unseen. So if you purchase our membership, you will get access to behind the scenes and kind of things that go on while we're recording Untolds. They're still in the making, so obviously if you're only purchasing the membership to see the unseens, hold off on it for a while, guys. They'll probably be coming out the same time as season 2. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling on, guys. thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.